See it taller? I'll do it.
For us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, this year, this year, like, because Milton Brian's not, he got coaches there for football and basketball. And so, yeah, like, we had workouts on Sunday, and I went with them, and I told him he, like, wants to see me again. So he said I'm making a scholarship this year, but it stays back in last year. Because I saw a school, so I'm not sure right now. So that's what the coach was trying to do.
Miss Martin, age-wise.
Yeah.
That's fine. You're good now. Let's keep something up.
So this is the October 9th meeting of the Riverwood School Governance Council, and it is now 4:05, and we'll call the meeting to order. I will note that Deborah Davis has a conflict, and as does Don Davis, so neither of them will be here today. I do have a couple comments about the agenda, but first I need a motion to approve the agenda as motion? Motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second? Thank you. So 2 points of discussion. One is, does anybody here need to leave before 5:45?
Yes.
What time do you need to leave?
No later than 5:30.
Okay. Item 9, which is added to the agenda, which is a response to the Georgia Attorney General. I want to make sure that everybody present had an opportunity to be aware of that. I didn't want to put it ahead of action items. But since Dr. Compass may have to leave, could we agree to handle that after the waivers and requests for flexibility to move that up? So we're just going to move that up. Okay.
Biology, remediation, EOCT classes are in room 704.
And the other thing, I addressed this at our September strategic planning meeting, but I realized that not everybody was there, so I'm going to address it again. And if anybody has a concern or wants to revisit this, we just add it to the agenda, which is why I'm discussing it as part of the agenda. Okay? A question has come up about why our students and our principal vote. So as a reminder, before we became part of the school governance council through the charter system, we were a conversion charter. So we asked Dr. Ragosa in writing to allow us to continue certain things about our conversion charter, including our governance structure. So we do have a statement from the school board attorney, and actually I'm just going to go ahead and pass this out to everybody to see this personally. Which says, Dr. Ragosa responded and specifically granted the school permission for all that was requested. As such, by allowing Riverwood to keep its current governance council through June of 2014, that necessarily included the current members of that council, which includes the students and principal. The council's structure that is still currently in use through June 2014 allows these students and the principal to vote, so they can continue to do so under Dr. Ragosa's permission granted in the letter. And the letter is posted online. So the attorney then goes on to say, however, that if we decide we don't want it to be that way, we can change it so that the students and the principal don't vote. Now, personally, I think we have brilliant students, and I value their opinion, and I think it's working quite well to have them vote. But if anybody at this point of the council members has a concern about the fact that our students or our principal vote, we can add it to the agenda and talk about it. If not, we'll just move on with the attorney's advice. We need to add this to the agenda and talk about it anyway. All right, matter closed. So now we will move to the agenda as published and distributed. And our second item is the approval of the September, oh wait, we have to go back and vote on the agenda. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. We decided we don't need to revise it. All in favor of the agenda as submitted? Say aye. Aye. All opposed? Now I need a motion to approve the September 10th minutes, which were distributed in the Dropbox. Is there a motion? Second? Second. Any comments or revisions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And our third item is the approval of the September 25th strategic planning session minutes, which were distributed via Dropbox. I have a motion to approve those. Thank you, Claire, I'm staring at you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, and now to the reason we are all here. It's my pleasure to introduce Kathy Burke, who's the Deputy Superintendent for Operations with the School District, who's graciously agreed to spend some time with us, catching us up on some recent activities and future plans regarding our school. So, thank you so much for being here.
So, I'm sure everybody's heard recent news about Hertzberry Elementary School, and so as we started to have conversations about where that site would be located in the future, it of course prompted additional discussion around what are we doing at Riverwood. For those of you who aren't familiar, of course, Hertzberry, we're in the process of going through some public hearings on a piece of property on the other side of Riverwood, or on the other side of 285. That will become the new site. Why? The board had a conversation back in May of this past year that basically said, you know, we looked at the option of trying to rebuild on the existing site, and the decision was made that the site is just too tight to try to meet the requirements of both schools. So Hertzberry is subsequently being moved off this site in part due to redevelopment of this site. So it's a win-win. And one of the council members here in the city said it best, I thought. We're going to end up with two outstanding schools in Sandy Springs, two gems of schools in Sandy Springs. During the May presentation to the Board of Education, I'm going to apologize to my colleagues behind me. Since there's a camera here, I'm going to try to face the camera as best I can. So I apologize ahead of time. During that same May presentation, just to make sure we're all on the same page, the board had a lengthy conversation about renovation addition as the program within the SPLOST program. And for those of you who are familiar and were around in the capital campaigning part of SPLOST, you know that that was what was initially envisioned at the school. During the conversation, though, the board said that what may make the most sense here is to make that addition, renovation, the funds there, a first step towards a future school. And so in doing so, sort of open the door to a conversation about a different process. What I'm going to share with you is a little bit, I'm going to share with you sort of big boxes of timeframes and what those processes entail. I do want to throw out my typical disclaimer. The board has yet to approve anything, so we need to bring some of these items to the board, and we'll be doing so in the near future just to ensure we're all on the same page again. I think we are consistent with what was said in May, and so there are some obvious next steps, and we need to get going here fairly quickly. When that project changed from just a pure renovation addition, the time frame changed with it. So if you're going to achieve the goal of the addition renovation, that budget becomes the first step towards a new school in the future, you need to know what that future is. And I know everybody wants to know, well, what's it going to look like, where the ball field's going to be, how we're going to use the Hertzberry land. Until you have that complete design, there's no way to know. So we have to go through that process, and it's a very deliberate process. And in past practice, there's been a way in Fulton County that we have gone through that process to engage the design firms and to employ the architect for that type of project. So what we are feverishly doing at this moment, in addition to all the other things we're doing around several site acquisitions that are going on concurrently right now, is we're beginning the planning phase associated with a design portion. What I've tried to do is sort of get the big buckets here on the screen for you all. We have recently proposed to the Board of Education our qualified architects, so we've re-solicited our architects for the district. We did include some language around all the program, including the Riverwood program, within that solicitation. And what we've done is we've qualified a list of 15 architects district-wide to work with the district as we design all of our renovations, additions, work, and this type of project. in the near future. That is being approved. Hopefully, it's on consent agenda. That is being approved on Tuesday the 15th. So we'll have an approved list of architects to begin to work with on this next cycle of design. As a part of that, we created tiers of expertise for our individual architects. And one of the tiers, we have what we call Tier 1. Those are our architects who work on the big projects. Tier 2 are architects who qualified because of their work experience to work on smaller projects, smaller renovations, and then Tier 3 firms were ones that ones who could provide specialty services. And one of the specialty services we solicited for was what's called shredding, or being able to do programming pre-design work. So what we're anticipating, and again, I'm going to share this with the Board of Education hopefully in November, what we're planning right now for is that first phase. We're going to use this as an opportunity to engage the community around the high school design. There will be a multi-step process here. Again, we have not hired the firm to conduct the charrette, so I don't want to dictate what that looks like. I have in my mind what that looks like, but I don't want to get ahead of the experts on that. That process is going to be first in the sequence of events. Again, it's a broader conversation about what does space look like, what are adjacencies like, what should 21st century learning look like in a high school environment. Yes?
Are we allowed to ask a question?
Oh, sure.
During the shredding, which is a new word I've learned today.
Charrette, yes.
Charrette. At the end of that, will they know where on the property?
No. So let me talk a little bit about what the output is. Charrette is really about programming. And what do I mean by programming? You're defining what you're going to give the architect to then turn into a design. And it gets around what do adjacencies look like, what does space look like. We have an ed spec, so they'll start with that. Ed specifications, for those of you who aren't familiar, really define what does space look like. It's to ensure that it's aligned to the instructional program. This will be a conversation or enable us to have that conversation again within an environment. Now, some of that, of course, will be engagement with staff, both central learning committee staff, central office staff, teachers here on staff. We're looking forward to that process. It will also at some point involve a community component too. Again, I can't get to the specificity because I'm not the
I guess I'm
person
just
that's
trying to
performing.
stay ahead of the community concern of traffic flow and bus entrance and exits and all that.
We're going to have lots of fun talking about neat things, and those will be some of the things that we'll talk about. Yeah, this is a really exciting project for us, I have to admit. So charrette's where we begin. That begins the programming phase. What we're envisioning at this point is inviting firms, let me back up. Typically in high school design, we go through what's called a design competition. So we have prototype high schools, but part of what we heard from the board is the approach here needs to be different, i.e. a typical prototype design is not going to apply here. You've got different site conditions here. You've got uniqueness in how we're having to stage this project to any future project, so we need to hire for that. In the past, when we've gone through design competitions, what we typically will do is invite several firms to compete. Here, what we're anticipating is that we've gone through a recent solicitation, so we'll get concurrence from the board on how many firms we might invite to participate. And then those folks would also be involved with the shredding process, more as an observer than anything else, so that they can see how those conversations with the students, the staff, are going, and that would then provide input on not only what the program would be, how it aligns to the ed spec, but also a little bit of those conversations will help drive what they might bring back to the community as design concepts for the school. That process is about a 9-month process. We've recently done one of these at the middle school level, and it takes that long to go through that. And we will want to check in with our board frequently through the process that we're in concurrence with the specs as we hand this off to the next phase, which would be the design phase. The conclusion of that would be the award of the project to an architectural firm. And that's when design gets going. And design's when you get into the more detailed pieces. They'll begin with conceptual ideas at first, of course. Some of those will come out during the design competition phase. But you'll start to see more of those specificities about how's this going to lay out, what's it look like from a sequencing perspective, how we're using old facilities or new facilities, how are we leveraging what we have on this site in terms of site conditions. All of that starts to happen during design. A lot of that conceptual work happens earlier in that phase. By the end of this, you have a set of construction drawings that you can go to market with.
Patrick?
And that's the goal.
I'm sorry. As far as what's usable here and what's not, either because it's just old, it doesn't fit our needs, it's antiquated, is that decision made during the charrette phase or during the design
It will
phase?
be during the design phase. They bring us the solutions. We don't, and staff were facilitators, really. I mean, what do the construction folks do? They manage these processes each step of the way. And staff will be there to help manage the charrette and ensure that we're getting a good delivery on or handoff to the design process, and then managing the timeframes around design, the deliverables, and the budgets, all of those things that we have to watch.
So at some point, some architects or engineers come out and evaluate what we have, or is that correct?
A lot of evaluation's already been done. There's tremendous amounts of documentation about the condition of this building, what works, what doesn't. Here, there's a bigger conversation, well, how did these pieces tie into a future school?
Yes.
What I don't want to do is rush into a solution. You've got to get what is the ideal solution based upon the input of what creates an ideal work environment.
Yes, sir.
That's the whole design process.
Thank you.
Can I just make a, I just want to make a process statement for those in the audience. We do have a number of staff members and community members, which we appreciate. This is not an open meeting. This is a meeting of the Governance Council, which you have the ability to observe. So the interaction with Mr. Burke for today will be with the Governance Council and Mr. Burke. We do have time for public comment at the end of the meeting, and at approximately 5 o'clock, we'll put out a sign-up sheet, so anybody who wants to speak can sign up to speak at the end of the meeting. We'll certainly be open to maybe further along the process, having Mr. Burke come back for more of a community forum where we can have time to engage the full community, but that's not what this meeting is about. So I just wanted to explain the process. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. What's different about this project as we've sort of redefined the outcome is that those blue pieces of this puzzle. So in a typical addition renovation, the scoping, the objectives, I mean, that is a lot more limited, what kind of conversation you can have about an addition or renovation, because if you're replacing HVAC in a building, you're replacing HVAC in a building. We have design specifications that dictate that. When you get into this type of conversation, it gets a lot more, I always get confused, right brain, left brain, but the creative side of the brain kicks in earlier in this process, and then the other side, the rational part, starts to put the pieces together the closer you get to design documents. And that's when they're handed off. So, of course, when design is completed, we have construction drawings, we go to market, we bid. Of course, Fulton County staff work with general contractor and the general contracting community to perform construction. So it goes out to bid, we get our bids back, we award our bid, and the project begins. You can see about roughly where that time frame hits. Our goal is to be there at the time where Hertz Ferry is transitioning over, because it gives us an opportunity to optimize. We're going to be on site with heavy equipment during demolition, and that can help us leverage that investment in getting to a future state. Again, we don't know what that future state is, but let me just give you an example to clarify. So, for example, if it's determined baseball fields go in there because we need to build on where the baseball field is, this will improve our ability to set up the school and not to minimize the impact of construction on the overall operations of the building. So you might start the building of your baseball field with the demolition permit and place the site while you've got heavy equipment on the site. So those are the types of things we want to leverage, and that begins that whole process of construction. Current schedule is to deliver what is expected in 2017. I'm just going to put it out there until we know what it is we're delivering, what that looks like. All of this is subject to change. But that is the current schedule. That is the goal, it's delivery in 2017. And given the change in the approach, it is a very tight timeline. And I know it seems like a long time away, but there's a lot that goes on between now and then.
So is our takeaway from this, Patrick, that Hertz Ferry would open in the fall of 2016?
No, Hertz Ferry will open in the fall of 2015. 2015 will be demoing Hertz Ferry.
Okay.
So that's the goal right now for Hertz Ferry.
Answer that, and then I can follow up.
The question is, what's the goal for the opening of Hertz Ferry? and our current schedule is to open Hertzberg in fall of 15.
So what does demo mean?
Demolition of that building.
Oh,
Taking
no,
down
I got it.
the
I'm
building.
not going to demonstrate either.
No.
I need a fancy
No,
So it'll be vacant all of 2015.
in the, that is trying to time with the departure of the students over to the new building, so we
Okay.
can begin demolition soon thereafter. It's never good to leave empty buildings around for any period of time, so our goal is always to get it down quickly. And I think we just need to be timing our construction to take advantage of that.
So we don't interpret that as mid-2015?
No, that's a
Okay.
beginning period, and those things are running concurrently. So that was, the intent there of that visual was the Hertzberg demo would begin at that time and Riverwood construction would begin at that time. Presumably, because we're trying to minimize the impact of construction on the sequencing, on the operations of the schools, we want to take full advantage of the full site, which was the whole intent of moving Hertzberg to a new location.
If for some reason the new Hertzberg site is not quite ready, Plan B be to use the current building in case, or?
Right. And, you know, one thing I can ensure is uncertainty in the construction. What we do, though, is assess every single project and its risk and try to manage those risks. So that is our goal. If for any reason we were pushed, I think you would push to a midterm opening, but there's no conversation of that at this moment. So, yes, you would have to continue to occupy Hertzberg until
Which is
we're
another reason to leave it up.
Right. But we are really trying to pull out all of the tools necessary to ensure Hertzberg is opening on time. That's part of the reason why publicly you've seen signs go up on that side around condemnation proceedings. That predicts with more certainty tenant relocation, because there are tenants within that building that have legal rights to those contracts. And so we want to make sure we're putting that on a critical path. That is in the critical path of construction right now. Similarly, we brought last night a new construction delivery model that we don't currently use in Fulton County called CM at Risk. One of the projects that we identified as a candidate for CM at Risk as a delivery model is this project. That's just a way of buying construction services from the market. So the typical model of design, bid, build, which I described here on Riverwood, would be a little bit different on Hertzberg. We're going to engage a general contractor sooner because we've got a high rise to take down. There's a lot of complexity to that project. The sooner we can engage the general contractor within the design process, the more successful we're going to be at opening that building on time. So we're trying to pull out every single tool we have in our tool belt and get the right ones in the toolbox to make sure we're as successful there. Other questions?
So the only thing I would just bring up is, I think the timing of that demolition, I know you'll be considerate of that, but that's gonna impact traffic. But also having a vacant building adjacent to a high school campus is a huge safety and security concern, so we hope that that would be done as quickly as possible.
I couldn't agree more. Again, I hadn't thought about it from the perspective of the high school, but certainly we always think of the fact that empty buildings can attract problems. Next to a high school is
Yeah, more
as
on
we
the-
know, an extra level of complexity. Yes, good point. Excellent point. Other comments? So as you can see, I mean, we have a long way to go, but soon after the beginning of the year, you will start to hear some engagement around the shredding process. And we'll start with the school leadership, because that's where we like to start, is to really get it right with the teachers, the instructional team, and then bring some of those concepts out of that shredding process. And we'll talk to the experts. Again, I will not be running that process. We're going to buy those services. So just stay tuned as to what that will look like.
So, do you have more after this, or is this? what-
This is it.
Okay, so,
Yeah, I wish I had more, I really do.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want to take time away from anything else you had to present. On the charrette, I think that's a very exciting process, and I hope the community understands that this is only, I think, the second time we've done this in terms of school expansion or build. And so it's a great opportunity for our community. I think it's a great opportunity to think also of this question of what does it mean to be an international school, and what does that mean in terms of use of space. And I think it's going to be a really exciting part of what we're looking at in the strategic plan and a number of other things. So how many people get to participate in that, and when should we start
planning phase will include selection of the firm, to sort of start setting those objectives. So we'll begin those conversations probably in November, December about what's that going to look like, when are the meetings going to occur, what's the right frequency, who needs to be at what meeting. What I think we need to be careful of is you need to get some meat on the bones before you broaden the conversation to big groups. So, and I think that's going to be the challenge to the firm that's selected is how can we ensure we're allowing the right engagement at each level of that process. The thing I can guarantee is it's going to be a lot of fun. I've been through one recently, and that you go into these things sort of thinking, oh, it's going to come out this way. And it's, my last experience was not that at all. It came out completely different, very creative, interesting ideas come forward in those meetings, and that's the idea. So let's get out of the box and let's take some limitations. Now we do have ed specs again, we have to follow. Let's take some of the limitations about adjacency. What does that look like in the 21st century? So I think Dr. Shaw's going to have fun.
Yeah.
So are you thinking that it's this school year or next school year
It's
that the
this
actual?
school year.
The charrettes would be held.
Correct.
And then the other point I'll make, and I'll yield the floor. As you've experienced, our surrounding community is very interested in what happens with this property, whether they have children here or not. And so I think we want to just be sensitive to engaging some representatives of the broader community in addition to just the school community.
We'll probably do some, well, not probably, we will do some check-ins and take advantage of the governance council as a touch point. It's just too much of an opportunity not to get it right, so on the front end.
Right, other questions from the governance council members about the timeline, the process, what's next?
So just to confirm, we'll know the architects by Tuesday?
No, no. What we will have approved is a group of 15 architects that will be used by the district. What we need to do as staff is, now that those have been approved, is make sure we're pairing the right skill sets. It will be two separate groups. The firm that performs the shredding services will not be a firm that will compete on the design. What I don't want to do is get ahead of the board on issues related to anything that might touch specifications prior to design. We sort of had some valuable learned lessons the last time we went through the shredding process, and we want to get it right this time. So that firm will be independent of the design process. With that said, the intent would be to have those design firms in the room listening, not really participating, but
And
listening
when you
to
say
the
design
conversation.
firms, you're talking about architects?
Architects.
Okay.
Yes. So in the past, what we've always done is design competitions and opened it up. So when we did that at Johns Creek, or when we built the South Fulton High School, ended up being Westlake first, even though the design competition was actually held around Langston. That's how we approached it. We opened it up to a handful of firms. The nice thing is we've just gone through the qualifying process. We've improved our architectural qualifying process tremendously. It's extremely rigorous now to get selected as one of those firms. And the higher you are on those tiers, is the higher you rank as to the firm capability against our construction objectives. So what we'll take advantage of is that recent vetting process to select a few firms to compete.
So is the competition different than an RFP, or have they all, by then they would have already sent in their RFPs and this is in addition to that?
This is even more, yes, it's an additional step in the process.
So they've already sent in RFPs and they've been approved to be a competitor?
For all design work in Fulton County, yes. So it's a two-step process. We make them do a detailed RFP in response to what we ask them for, and then we come in and we interview and we really beat them up around those criteria.
And actually, do they make 3D models or? how's that?
The design competitions,
Yes.
they get into things like that.
Okay.
That's exactly right. So you start to get conceptually what's it gonna potentially look like. There's a lot of expense to participate in that. So typically there's a small fee paid to those firms by the district to participate. Again, we need to talk to the board about that.
And so at the end of the day, how many firms do you expect to truly compete for high school? Because some of these 15, their niche may be elementary schools.
Correct. We will use the ranking. I want to discuss that with the board, how many we let into that discussion. Because there's a cost associated with it, and it's beyond my authority to approve, so I need their authority to approve that. But I would go essentially down that list and look at who are willing participants. And most architect firms at the top of that list are going to be interested, and they're incredible firms.
Would have experience building.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Are there questions from the other side of the table? Sorry.
Being that the school is gonna be bigger, is the attendance always gonna change?
You know, to be determined. I mean, you already have almost enough students here to fill a full capacity high school, so stay tuned is all I can say about that. Current projections show, even with what the governance team has done about limiting enrollment from outside students, that it's going to shoot in the other direction. So, to be determined. I never can commit that far out. Usually we make those decisions about a year ahead.
I do have a question on that note. We are still going to be in a position of making some determination about out-of-zone enrollment. As you know, we limited it to siblings and students that reach who met the magnet criteria. And I think last year we were later in the decision-making process with some of those decisions than the community would have preferred. When do you think we would have projections that we could work with so that we could make recommendations about that?
Let me get back to you about that. There's no reason why it's, I would think they fall.
I would hope, I think last year we were pushed to wait until that we had the official board, board presented numbers, which really don't change that much. So the earlier we could have something to work with to start our conversation, I think it would be the better.
The issue's been raised, and I've already told staff to prioritize the same strength areas so that it would be done first and we have those numbers sooner versus later. We see that as an input as you want into the projections. We don't like to do it on the back end either.
Okay, that would be helpful.
One more question, Zach. Is there any historical data that shows you any trends for enrollment when a school is under construction? Does that impact enrollment? And then when your bright new shiny school opens, do you see it accelerate?
Yeah.
Because
So,
our
yes.
estimates, I guess, are based on our not so shiny.
So, okay. So yes, not as much during construction. I haven't seen an impact in the past. And of course, we haven't replaced that many high schools. So we've recently replaced Vanderbilt High School. No real impact of construction other than the first weeks of school at that particular site, people didn't know where to go to register, so there was a little bit of that. But in terms of how you get the first month and all like that. Is there the potential of a shining school effect? Yes, that has happened in the past. It happens, I would say it's happened at least 50% of the time at our high schools. And most recently in Banneker. I opened that school and had 100 additional students show up.
Obviously, we think we're unique in that we have the potential of so many students that live in our district that don't attend here now.
Right.
I kind of saw that at Ridgeview.
Right, and that entered into the conversation about what the right long-term solution is. And you need 50 acres to be successful as a high school. That's one of the reasons why. So,
And
yes.
do they build that in? I mean, the last thing we want to do is open up a brand new high school and have to put a bunch of trailers outside. So did they build that? Is that considered in
It's more
design?
considered, not really in design, more about what is the attendance and placement policy.
Well, I
And
guess
that's how you
design from
manage
the sense of if we needed to add another block of
Correct.
6
Oh, I see what you're saying.
classrooms or something.
What, again, we have a spec we built to that the board's approved, and that current FTE, it depends on the configuration of the classroom, but it's roughly 1,900 to 1,950 FTE. So we would have to stay in that limitation unless the board granted us some variance from that. We do try to be sensitive to the future, so where would we add on in the future is one thing to think about, where would we put portables? Those are all things that we try to consider, particularly on a high school site.
Because there's places in this building I could put you that you probably wouldn't get out for a week.
Especially not if the lights went out.
Yeah.
All right, any other, yeah, any other questions from the governance council members at this point? The only observation I'm gonna make is that I think this charrette process would be a great process for some of our design engineering students to shadow. And I don't know if somebody might wanna talk to Dr. Mason about seeing, full disclosure, my son is in that class. But I think this is taking sort of a lot of the design thinking and putting it in action, and it would be a great opportunity for some of our students to maybe help at the meetings, pass out information, and observe the process. You'd be open to that, I
Oh,
presume.
absolutely. We want student participation, and that's always, I think that always adds value
Yeah,
to that process.
I think there may be several places where this could be a great opportunity for student participation.
This is the creative part of the architecture. I used to stay up late at night and talk to architecture and sleep, and this is the beauty of that part. And then you gotta get pencil to pad, or pencil paper, really draw and decide to get to the hard documents and the cost limitations and the budget. I mean, but this is the fun part.
Okay.
And I have a question that ties in what Bruce said. And I'm not sure this is 100% accurate, but I was thinking the projections of student attendance in year 2017, when we would be projected to open, is close to 2,200 students. Does that ring a bell, kind of, sort of, or is that off?
That's a bold projection based upon some assumptions that we can, it assumed that your old matriculation rates of your out-of-district students would continue at the same levels, which I think was about, this is well before Dr. Shaw, I want to say it's like 140 students out of zone per cohort. So those have been sort of ranked back, so the new projections show a decline and then an increase. But that'll be a point of conversation on how you start setting those determinations for out-of-district enrollment.
And
it's
we
probably-
don't have an in-district projection at this point for 2017.
No, we do. I'll have to get you those figures, so I don't know.
And in your guesstimation, would that exceed the 1900 benchmark? We don't know at
It
this
doesn't
point.
currently, is my memory.
Okay.
You will remember, I don't think it does.
We had a presentation from this, from I think the
Mhm.
2000 mark, 1900, 2000, if I remember correctly.
Is that using the old or the new assumption?
That was good.
I'll have to look at that, so it's not-
So, I guess if Bruce's point of be ashamed to open a brand new school and be at capacity with no room to grow, and whatever variances, requests are needed, clearly that needs to be part of the early on process.
Well, it's a discussion we're gonna have to have on an annual basis really every year until we get to that open.
Right,
So we actually came in a little bit below, correct? So, I mean, every year we adjust.
right.
One thing I always know about forecasts is it's gonna be wrong. We try to be within that variance that it doesn't matter from an allocation perspective, teacher allocation or credit perspective.
Any other questions? So the only other thing that I would add is that we do have, as you know, a capacity facility committee, which Bruce is chairing, and then we also have a communications committee, which Claire Martin is chairing. So I think it would be ideal if you could channel the information through the governance council, and then through those committees, we can make sure that the school community has the information, and also that we can channel information back to you, because we don't need 2,000 parents designing this school. So, we have channels in place, and I think the charrettes are going to be an ideal opportunity for people to participate firsthand. Okay.
Very good.
All right, thank you so much. We know how busy you
you.
are, and we appreciate you. Okay, and also, we are going to put Mr. Burke's presentation on the website somehow, right? So those, since we did that at about 4:15, we know a lot of people can't be here, that way people can see it. The next item on our agenda are the waivers and requests for flexibility. Dr. Shaw.
Okay, so last meeting, we worked through our strategic plan and made sure that our goals, strategies, long-term, I shouldn't say goals, long-term outcomes, strategies aligned, had some great conversations that I felt were very productive. So the next step in the process is now saying, as a governance board, what do we need to request flexibility on? And what's that going to look like? And Crystal, again, has been great. She's come out and worked with Mr. Blackwell and myself to look at what waivers we're going to request and what that process looks like. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Blackwell, as he is the expert in what this is going to look like.
So we basically have identified a couple of areas where we think that this group will need to submit for public comment. You know, remember the role of the governance council in these requests for flexibilities is both to approve the overall plan for them, but then also to make sure that it, you know, Claire, for example, to make sure that, you know, her committee puts it up on the website, that we have a public comment box located within the school at some place, and they have to, we need to do that at Drop Dead by November 11th, allowing us the required number of days before winter holiday. So like Dr. Shaw was saying, we've done some pre-work on that, and so I'll share with you kind of where we are. And, you know, currently we're working on 2 potential requests for flexibility. One of them, I don't know if folks are very well familiar with, but one of them is specifically targeted at more of our IB diploma track students. And we're going to map that back to some of our long-term outcomes in the strategic plan of the engaging learning experiences, and specifically the standards and practice that contribute to international mindedness, which for those of you who weren't at the last meeting, that was our 4th added long-term outcome that I think we were all very appreciative of. In essence, what it's going to allow our students to do is to be exempt from the state of Georgia and, well, what we propose. It will allow us to do is to be exempt from the state of Georgia and Fulton County's requirement that those particular students have taken taken what they call physical science. There is a physical science graduation requirement, and the 2 courses that we currently offer at Riverwood that satisfy that are physical science, very appropriately, or physics. And those are the only 2 classes that we currently offer that would satisfy that graduation requirement. That's complicated for some of our students who are on the IB diploma track because, just to give you one example, if they are following a very specific pathway in sciences and they choose to, you know, take some chemistries and that's a specific area of focus, basically they're precluded from having the ability to take that graduation requirement within their schedule because of course sequencing, meaning they must start with biology and then they must take a next level course. So they're prevented from that. Provides challenges, you know, they're either, you know, maybe if we didn't have that waiver, facing having to take a class in summer school or potentially not working towards something that we here at Riverwood value quite a bit, which is, you know, seeking IB diploma, at minimum participating in IB classes. So that's one that we're mapping out currently. And again, it would exempt those students from the physical science graduation requirement. In our thinking right now, it doesn't you know, cost us any more money to do that. In fact, if anything, it's only, you know, an assistance to the kids. And part of our rationale is going to be that by exempting them from that graduation requirement, we're really enabling them to take classes that are more internationally minded. So they're in an IB class instead of physical science. They're taking IB design technology at the standard level, or they're taking an IB chemistry class, or they're taking IB environmental sciences. So this is all in fitting with the idea that at Riverwood we value perhaps something a little bit more curricularly rigorous or enhancing. Not to say that the physical science graduation requirement is anything other than appropriate, but so that's one that we're working on and are going to probably propose. The second one.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell. That, for informational purposes, that's a waiver that we already have and support our IB program for the last however many years.
It was, yeah, in conversion charter. The second one that we're working on is a waiver to request exemption from a teaching certificate requirement. And sort of here's the background to that. We have at the past at Riverwood and are wanting to again bolster offering a reading comprehension and reading fluency remediation program to some of our students. There are many in our population who come from our feeder middle school who quite frankly, are below where they need to be with what we might consider to be very basic reading competencies. And as you might imagine, that proves to pose quite an academic challenge because that bleeds across all levels of the curriculum. Well, high school teachers are not typically certified as reading instructors. So if you were to have a student at the elementary level, for example, some of those teachers are certified in the area of reading because there are reading classes there. It's not a typical area of specialty for a high school teacher. In fact, our teachers typically have a specialty in the area of English. So the proposed waiver that we're working on will exempt our teachers, English teachers specifically, or perhaps a special education teacher who has the English concentration, from having to have that reading certification in order to teach a reading class here at Riverwood. Current plans for it, are not just to take a teacher who doesn't specialize in that area and set them free and say, do what you will. We have very specific curriculum plans that will enable that teacher who may not have a specialty in the area to follow a very successful, data-driven curriculum that we think will work. It's also a program I think that they've used in our feeder middle school, so we have some sharing with them that kids can follow through in the program. But we do have to make a request to exempt from that since our teachers aren't technically able to teach it. That will map directly to our long-term outcome of specifically enhancing the 9th grade students' academic performance. We will target specifically 9th and 10th graders and a couple of others. So that's sort of where we are in the process right now. What we'll need to do is, I think we're very close to having that mapped out in a way that, the governance council can see, understand, and approve. But unfortunately for the moment, I don't think that that's something that we can take action on in terms of saying, yes, we approve those, because we have to prepare for you a little budget item that still needs to be done. But that's where we are. Now, we do have to have those posted for public comment by November 11th. So it will necessitate us coming together at some point before then and saying, here are the completed documents, questions, comments. But that, in essence, is where we're planning on going, and the only two things that we've identified as needing.
So, we'll talk about the timeline in a minute, but are there questions about the two that have been proposed or thoughts about other flexibility requests?
I think it's important that the public knows that the first one, that we've been using the first one for a few years already. Is the second one new and different, or have we been using that?
Well, we haven't had to have the waiver in the past. We have in the past had the reading program that we plan to use. Although I want to be really clear, we don't necessarily intend to limit ourselves in the waiver request by saying we will use this reading program, because that's limiting. And if it doesn't work, we don't want to be bound to sticking with something that doesn't work. But we have in the past, several years ago, used this reading program, and our teachers have taught it. At the time, we were lucky enough to have an English teacher who also had that certification. It's not common, though, and we haven't had for a long time. So I would feel comfortable saying that this is something that we have done before and have seen success with, but we haven't had this specific waiver in our conversion charter. Does that make sense?
And Ms. Martin, for a little more background information, our kids come to us, especially if they come to us from a feeder school, with a ton of information about their reading level, CRCT score, decile level. Frustration on our part is, we've got the program, we've got the information, we've got the kids who need it, but because that reading certification is so rare, we couldn't put it together. So this waiver basically allows us to serve these kids better who really need it.
Thank you.
My question would be, are there any other waivers in the conversion charter that we are not pursuing? What would those be and why?
Well, I would think I would give the example of, and Dr. Shaw, chime in if you'd like. We did, I think, talk at the last go. we did at the last governance council talk a little bit about, and Dr. Shaw referenced it, the desire to look at what sort of enhancements we could make to the website. And there was sort of question about, well, does that need to be a waiver? We don't think at this point in time it will need to be a waiver. We're looking at ways that we might be able to get back to some of the information sharing that we had on our former website, some of those looks and icons without doing a waiver.
I think the question was, are there waivers in the conversion
Yeah.
charter now
Oh, I'm sorry.
that we're not asking to continue?
That was the question.
Sorry, Pam.
That's all right. So do you want to answer that question now?
Let me try answering that one.
Yeah. But I like that other answer, that was awesome.
No, is the answer.
So there are no other waivers that we're letting expire?
No.
Okay.
Well,
Well, wait a minute, no.
There are-
We are letting them expire. For example,
good reason.
yeah, the language program, the Heritage Language Program waiver, obviously outdated, we don't need that anymore. And we had this discussion, and I just went blank on some of the other ones that just aren't really relevant. Crystal, you.
I just wanted to
Yes,
provide
ma'am.
just a clarification to the council because, some of our conversion charters are a bit different from the normal schools that are just converting into the charter system. So for conversion charters operating, that used to operate under their original charter, as they transition into the charter system, they have to revisit those original waivers and say which one of these, over the course of the years, do we not need anymore? Are we going to allow to expire? Or what are the things that we are doing, such as the first example that will be made, that we want to continue? And then through the RFF process, request for those waivers again, and also prove why they've been effective and why you would like to continue to use them. So whereas the Governance Council manages the RFF system, with the conversion charters, it's a bit different because of the original charter, you already have some waivers in place. Some you might use, some you might not use, but with this RFF process, you need to bring in the ones that you're going to continue, that you agree you're going to continue to use through the RFF process, and also make a case for why, we're going to continue to use these things as a school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let me just comment on, and I want to hear from the teachers also, because I know you all looked at this. I mean, one of the things that there were several things that were waivers that were never actually implemented, and those I don't think we need to worry about. But one of the things that was in there was not allowing students to, I forget the language, but it was something about only allowing students to make up or fail classes a certain number of times. Now, why in the world would you do that? I mean, I'm sure there was probably a good reason, but if a child has to pass biology to graduate, why would you want to say, well, you can only retake biology twice? You need to keep taking it till you pass it. So I think over time, some of those things fell off because they weren't really being valued. And then there are a couple of things that are now actually in state law. There was something about graduation requirements, which I can't remember, but that's now state law, so we don't need to have a waiver for that.
Well, and so my answer to some of that was a lot of the things that were in our conversion charter, even if listed as a waiver. Here's another example. We asked to be waived from Fulton County's employee surplus process. In other words, what we said was, please don't make us take another teacher who is who is qualified and probably has done a wonderful job, but no longer has a position available at Alpharetta High School or at Westlake High School. They've been, they're now extra. We said, please don't make us take that person. Well, we were never granted that anyway. Every year we had to, consider taking surplus employees. So there were things in there that either didn't need a waiver or we know don't work and really aren't things that we can control. Another example was,
We talked about the principal selection process
Yeah.
waiver. The district has set up that process now so the community is involved, as I can attest to. So is that really a waiver that we still need?
and the way that we're approaching the waivers now is, what's so big that we need special dispensation? Not really things that we can, in good judgment, say, yes, we need to have a tutoring program after school, or things like that.
So,
And these waivers are just waiving state policy at this point, not Fulton County, or some do both, or is all of the state policy in the Fulton County? That's where I think it gets confusing in terms of,
Well, I mean, the two that we're thinking about right now, one deals with teacher certification, so that's state level filtered down to what Fulton County has to follow. And the other is graduation requirement, state level, filtered down to what Fulton County has to follow.
Well, just as an example, one that came up in the President's Council of the Organizations was the whole club structure at Riverwood and the requirement of it to be teacher-led. And I'm not sure we were clear whether that was a state requirement or Fulton County requirement, and that if parents could be more involved in the clubs, that they may be more robust. And that's just an example, and I'm not sure we want to spend a lot of time on it, but if there are additional waivers that people think might need to be brought forth, what's the process for doing that? And, I mean, I don't know.
I think this is the process. I do have a question for Crystal, though. If we think of something next year, we can have an RFF and bring it forth next year.
Absolutely.
So this isn't our only opportunity,
Yes.
but this is the opportunity for next school year.
Well, and maybe I should say how we arrived at the ones we thought we needed. So what we did was, we went down, and I don't have copies of them, but what we did essentially was kind of go down the right-hand side of that strategic planning document that was approved at this last meeting, which listed our strategic initiatives. And we said, so for us to begin tackling that, right now it's a concept in the mind and it's not put to paper, but for us to begin tackling that, can we foresee anything in there that we might need special dispensation for? And the answer to most of them is no. No, we don't. So, to think about what we agreed were our areas of focus for the next 3 years, we feel pretty comfortable that offering up those two waivers is really the only thing that we need to get us going on that. Now, as we've all said before, that's kind of a living, breathing document, so as we see, new needs, we may change, or we need another RFF in another year, certainly.
Could you, Pam's brought this up several times, we really haven't had a response to it. Could you perhaps, Dr. Charlotte, perhaps Ms. Clark's assistance, see if a waiver would be required in order to have parents manage clubs in isolation of perhaps talk about that with the leadership team, so that when we meet again, we can at least know your thoughts about whether that's something that's a good idea, a bad idea, and would it require a waiver? Because I think this is the third time that that's been mentioned. as a possibility.
Well, and it feeds into the strategic plan of engaging a broader community and exposing, outside of academics, exposing business leaders, community leaders, parent involvement on growing that experiential learning. And I don't know what the handcuffs are on that, but I've just heard over and over again, our club structure becomes kind of ineffective because the teachers just don't have the capacity to manage all of them. And the parents are happy to help, but I've heard that we have limitations on our ability to do that, so.
Well, there are limitations in certainly supervision, accountability, obviously safety, security, talking about background checks. One of the benefits of having a teacher do it is administratively, we do have accountability, supervision. Our teachers understand that if there's a club function, they don't leave until every child is accounted for. So it's not that I'm saying we can't have parents supervise it, I'm saying there has to be some very strict understandings that it has to be done correctly. And that's what I think the concern is. I mean, we'd love to see our clubs grow, but we also don't want them to be such a hodgepodge and people, sometimes, I'll give you an example, we run into this with our community coaches. Sometimes the administration doesn't even know who they are. And we've done a good job this year working with Coach Santoro to kind of align some of that, but, we can certainly talk about it with Crystal and with the district and see what those concerns are.
Because in my mind, I think the community coach model is really what we're talking about. Could we transfer the community coach model to non-athletic, selected, non-athletic clubs where they go through that same background check, have that same level of accounting, perhaps get some accountability, perhaps have some sort of a stipend. But, I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. I just know that it's been brought up several times, and I think it would be good to maybe flesh out the option a little bit more. And then also talk to your leadership team and let us know your point of view. So Dr. Kopkis and Dr. Square, I know that you all spent some
time thinking about this, or is there anything you'd like to add in terms of what we have now that we don't need, or things you talked about that we might want now or in the future?
Just to reference what you mentioned in regards to not allowing a student to repeat a course several times. What we found is a ninth grader may not take it seriously, and then begin 10th grade year, 11th grade year. And you had a senior and a lit class with ninth graders. Some of the things that are chosen and what's discussed is appropriate for a 14-year-old versus an 18-year-old who's not academically serious. And because there were other avenues to achieve credit, we felt they would pursue those other avenues. Whether it was summer school, virtual school online, Plato, was a reading program we had. There were other ways for them to achieve that credit without being in that ninth grade class and here at 15 years old.
So is that a waiver that you think we should continue then? Or do we need a waiver?
I would consider it because I know that the teachers who taught the course felt that the older student was a detriment to the class.
So I
Because of
guess,
their experiences and they were able to contribute and change the environment of the class.
I guess the question then is, are there other mechanisms within, so if I don't have transportation to go to summer school, and if I don't have money to enroll in the virtual school, are there other options within the school day that I can make up the course besides having to continue to sit in the classroom via Plato or other types of options? And I think,
It wasn't designed to shut the student out, but you have to consider the students who are age appropriate taking the course and looking at their benefit too, and there just need to be a mismatch.
so if that's something you all are interested in continuing, then perhaps that's something we need to bring back with a little more specificity to it.
In terms of finding other
Let
avenues.
me address
that they-
another part of that too is, and I don't know when these waivers were written, they may have been written when the money was flowing. Keep in mind how we're funded. We're not funded to continually teach kids over and over again. We're funded based on a certain number of kids per teacher. So, when we are concerned now more so than ever about class overcrowding, I think we do have to look at, if we're allowing kids to take classes over and over and over again, you run into a point where you're growing class sizes. Then there are more options today than ever before. There is Georgia Virtual, there's things through Fulton County, there's a lot of ways they can do it online and earn that credit. So I think we do need to talk about how that looks.
And I'm all for not having a child that didn't want to sit in a class and learn it the first time, have to go through that same experience a second time, when there are virtual ways to really expedite that, but making sure they have that opportunity, because we don't want them not graduating on time because we've taken away the opportunity. You get it. So,
Right.
all right, so could you take responsibility for looking into that one and maybe coming back with that?
I know that Independence High School has always been one of the options to send the schools out there, but the main issue is the transportation. Because they have to use more public transportation, so if we could, I don't know, bus transportation for these kids to go there, there's things that needs to be looked into.
One of the things that I'm working on is that international service learning. And what I don't know at this point, and maybe you could shed some light on this, is what if we were to do something like this that perhaps overlapped with spring break, but did go into the traditional school year? Do we need a waiver to pull those students out for a few days to do something like that? Funding?
Some sort of remediation, is that what you're talking about? I'm confused.
No. With the new strand that we put in the strategic plan,
Right.
in the far column, we have proposed an international service learning project, sort of in combination with
I
the
got
CAS
this.
thing
Okay, I
and so on.
misunderstood.
And I've been in touch with a couple of companies who do things like that.
Yes, sir.
But what I want to know is, do we have to, in terms of a waiver, write in things about funds for that, time for that? It's going to be
I don't,
during the normal.
and Crystal, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we need a waiver because we already have programs, travel programs, things that do stretch over that spring break time. I don't think we need a waiver to do that because there's no really state requirement that we're asking to be disavowed from.
So this would be my response. This is what I would encourage the council to do. It's my job to shop your ideas around and figure out whether we can do them. And if not, what our options are. And what works best for me is when you guys send me what you want to do with as much detail as possible. So many times you'll find that I won't say, yes, you don't need a waiver for that, or yes, go ahead and write a waiver, because I want to make sure that you guys don't, go too far in a process and then run up against the wall. So I will shop that idea to various departments that it's linked to and ask them, how does this work? This is what one of my schools wants to do. How can I help them do this? Is there anything that we need to take into consideration? Are there things that we might be able to shift in order to not have to write a waiver? Or if we do, what does that waiver need to look like in order for us to implement this program the way we'd like to? That's part of what we do as facilitators. So when you have an idea like this, I don't want you guys to get stuck on, do we need a waiver for that? I want you to go ahead and think through what you want to do, and you're not wasting your time. You're actually paving the way as the first cohort for many schools that will follow you. Flesh your idea out as much as you can. There's no specifics, there's no rules. Just flesh your idea as much as you can, share it with Dr. Shaw, he'll get it to me, and I will shop it around and ask questions. I might come back with a yes, I might come back with a no, because that's the real world. But most likely I'll come back with, this is what I learned. These are the parts that you can do, and these are the parts that you might have to shift in order for us to make this happen. Does that make sense?
When you say flesh those ideas out with Dr. Shaw, does that mean in this setting, or do we talk to him personally, or if we have ideas that where teachers may, or the community may come to you, or teachers, whoever, and say, this is an issue, and do we bring this to governance, or just straight to him and then he sends it to you?
So these are the measures that I use to decide in my mind whether something comes to council or not. There may be many issues in your community, but the issues that come to council and grow out from the council in the form of an RFF are issues that are aligned to the strategic plan, issues that stem directly from it, and that can make a good case for addressing some of the things in your strategic
But
plan.
RFFs cannot go forward unless the council approves them.
Correct.
Absolutely. So
That was
what
the
you want to
question.
do is to answer the second part of your question, once you've just, understood and the council comes to agreement, this is aligned to our strategic plan, let's talk about what this might look like. Then you talk like a council and gather as much information as you can. And then Dr. Shaw will be sharing that information with me, and I'll be here attending your meetings as well. And I'll be asking the questions behind the scenes to see what can we do. Not so much behind the scenes, but doing all the legwork that you can't do sometimes at the school level. So at Central, I visit different individuals from different departments and ask them questions about things that you guys want to do. Does that answer your question?
Well, and I think, to answer Portia's question too, it's easier for us to kind of flesh out the details, you and me, like for example, Dr. Kopkis, if you wanted to write something up and send it to me regarding this, and then I can take it to Crystal. It has to align our strategic plan, you can't have random acts of waivers. And then, most importantly, can it be done? And what does it look like when it's finished? But I think to your point, I think it's easier for you and I to sit down and say, here's what it looks like, take it to you, and then like, Ms. Greenway said, it doesn't go anywhere anyway until the council approves it. So, I think that's a good process to make sure that we flesh out the details. Because like you said, why go down the road if it turns out this will never happen? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, is there a particular format that you want this in?
Just
You write it up in
open
as a
text.
memo?
Yeah.
Just as much as you can about your idea. There'll be formal steps later on in the process.
But it might be helpful, I think it would be helpful if they saw the format now,
Well, the form.
just
the
to
format
see
is
what ultimately they're gonna have to be able to produce, which you gave us before, I think.
Do you guys remember when Erica presented on this? This is it. So there might be parts of this in the initial phase of an idea that you might not know about, but that shouldn't discourage you from sharing it. So as much of this as you can think about or think through, and then we'll take it from there and shop it around, and then we'll come back with questions that will actually help you fill this in.
So here's my question at this point. It's October 9th. So the rules say that we have to post them publicly November 11th. Our next meeting is November 12th. So all these steps that you're describing, including the staff conferring with Dr. Shaw to make sure that they're on the same page, putting something down, getting a first notion of, yes, it needs a waiver, having the governing council approve it, all that has to happen between now and November 11th. Yes. So,
Can we get a waiver?
so I think we have two options. One is, can we have a waiver till November 13th? And if not, folks, then we need to meet the week of November 4th instead of the week of November 11th. So my first preference would be that we meet on November 12th. Is there any opportunity to do that?
I can ask, but probably not. And what I'll also share is that a lot of councils are, you guys are in the first cohort, so this is not a difficulty that other councils aren't experiencing. So I understand, but you'll also have an opportunity to submit next year for RFFs as well.
So let me do this because I am sensitive. It's now 5:15 and we need to move on with the agenda. Let's do a poll of everyone who promised to respond. We'll do one of those little polls where we put dates out and you indicate what's good for you and see if we can find a date the week before. And then Dr. Shaw and the team, you have some work to do, I guess, to see what you want to bring forward. So these have been some real good ideas.
Well, and the one thing I would say is I think we need to have given Crystal the chance to shop the ideas, which is sort of what she's doing on our first two right now. That's why we can't make them action, because she's still shopping, so to speak. And that takes some time. So really what we need to probably do is back up and say, if we all need to be able to look at, and we do, this completed draft, which is 3 pages and includes a budget summary, then, if we're really going to want to offer up additional waivers for flexibility, we probably need to have those at least proposed, sort of the idea out on the table via email or whatever, within the next week or week and a half, so that we've got enough time to do the budget research and to let Crystal shop it to see what we need to write up and how we go about doing that and so
Well,
forth.
let me propose this. I think we can take a vote right now to agree to put these 4 ideas into the works, so to speak. We're not approving them for request for flexibility, but we're agreeing to have them vetted, developed and vetted. So then you go ahead with the 4 that we've talked about. And then we know that we may come back when we meet the week of November 4th, and Dr. Shaw and team may have decided this really, we're not ready to do this yet, or Crystal may have come back and said, you don't need a waiver at all. Then we'll actually vote on whether we go forward. But before we do that, let me just, did anybody else have an idea of something that required a waiver that we haven't talked about yet?
Yes, I do. Okay. I just had a question about it. I was going to ask Dr. Shaw, but when she said like there's no rules or anything,
Well, there's rules.
I mean,
When you share an
I'm
idea.
sensitive about the time, so
Yeah,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
all right, so I just wanted to ask about in relation to special ed teachers, and I know it's the law that special ed teachers have to write IEPs and things like that, but in an effort to focus more on improving the instruction and raising the caliber of instruction in special ed classes, they have brought to me that there may be a need for IEP writers, to have teachers serve as IEP writers. It's been happening in other schools, so that those teachers can focus more on instruction and collecting data for progress monitoring.
Well, that's a great idea, we can talk about it. The issue there is we cannot get any waivers from federal law. So we have to figure out what that looks like and what in that is state and county mandated and then what is federal mandated. Because if it's federally mandated, we're kind of stuck. But
We could put it
we
in
can
the
talk
hopper.
about it. Yeah, we can
Okay.
throw it in the hopper, I like
Okay,
it.
so the five
Okay.
things in the waiver hopper are the science, the non-certified reading instructor, the non-classroom options for repeating courses, the international field experience, and the alternative process to develop IEPs.
Yes, IEP writers.
And then potentially the clubs and organizations.
And the clubs and organizations.
So it's 6.
So it's 6, thank you.
Mike piggybacked with Dr. Pappas on the international field experience in terms of international studies.
And we'll just put that all in the big, international experiences, international field experiences. Okay, so we've got those 6 ideas. Can I get a motion to further explore those 6 ideas between now and our next meeting?
I make the motion to explore those 6 ideas.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in-
Seconded. I didn't.
You want to click Dr. Ms. Shaw? Go ahead.
Should be a doctor soon.
Yes, discussion.
I don't know if this is discussion, I just want to make one comment about something that was said, just to, I don't want to use the word clarify the record, but, because I know this wasn't intended, but when we talk about kids and reading in our middle school, I know it wasn't intended as any kind of reflection on the middle school.
Of course.
I know, and I just wanted to make
Right.
sure that.
No,
everybody
and
knew
actually,
that.
sir, it's kind of really to continue the great work they're doing, and that
Yes.
needs to be clarified. That's what I meant when I said they come to us with a lot of information, with a lot of data. Our teachers, I think, do a good job, and we're looking to do a better job of those transition activities. But sometimes what happens is those kids get here, and then we don't have the ability to continue to support them. So it's just the opposite. We want to continue the work they're doing.
Well,
So thanks for
sometimes
allowing
the
me to
kids-
clarify.
Sometimes the kids may not have even gotten there till 8th grade.
Correct.
Sometimes, I mean, there's, you know,
Correct. Thanks for
we
letting
just
me.
know that they do an
Appreciate
awesome job and
Sure.
under challenging circumstances.
Mhm.
Any other-
Just wanted to correct.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, thank you so much. Okay, our next agenda item, I have 2 items to hand out. On September 24th, I received a packet of information from the Georgia Attorney General's office regarding some complaints that have been filed regarding the Governance Council. The full content of the complaint, including all the information that was sent to the Attorney General, is in this envelope, if anybody cares to look at it, it's up here. So I am sending you the letter that the Attorney General wrote to me, and I'm going to paraphrase this in the interest of time. But basically, of all the information in the complaint, we were asked to explore one area, which is compliance with the Open Meetings Act. And what we were specifically asked to do is to have the attorney for Riverwood address the notice requirements issue and send a response back to the Attorney General's office. The second document, which is a longer document, is the letter to the Mr. Stephen Ritter, Senior Assistant Attorney General, from Carol Calloway, who is, as she says, the attorney for the school district and therefore the attorney for Riverwood. I won't bore everybody with all of this, but I will read the last 2 paragraphs. I am enclosing 2 copies of screenshots from the Riverwood website. The first screenshot is Riverwood's homepage. On the right-hand side of this homepage, you will see a posting about the upcoming meeting of the Governance Council. On the left-hand side of the homepage is a drop-down menu where the Governance Council tab appears. The second screenshot is the Governance Council website from the drop-down menu where you will find dates, agendas, various documents, a summary of actions taken in minutes, as well as a list of Governance Council members and their contact information. In addition, the meeting dates and agenda are posted on the front door of the school and in the main office, according to Principal Dr. Shaw. I believe you will find that Riverwood and its Governance Council understand the importance of the Open Meetings Act and are making every effort to comply with it in spirit and in fact. Please let me know if you have additional questions. So the sum of this is that we have not had any violations of the Open Meeting Act or any of the other things that were addressed in this packet of information sent to the Attorney General's office. But because this was about the council and not about any one of us, Dr. Shaw, I thought it was very important that the group knew that this had come forward and what the response was. So there's nothing we can do about it. It's just here for your information. I will say that I am going to take the packet with me because I need to be sure to review everything in here very carefully and make sure I understand it all. If you do want to look at it, it'll be in Susan Murphy's office next week, or you can come up and look at it after the meeting if you want to. The only other thing I'll point out is that as you look through here, You may wonder why there's a few things in here that are marked confidential or attorney-client privilege, but unfortunately, the standards for what is public record are very high. So I can send Opie an email and put confidential in the byline and say, why does Dr. Shaw keep calling me ma'am? It makes me feel like I'm a lady. And if Dr. Shaw goes to him and says, I need to see all of the emails between you and Ms. Greenway, it's still subject to public disclosure. So anyway, enough said about that, but I wanted to make sure that everybody had the benefit of that. I've briefed Deborah Davis, and Claire, if you would also brief Donna Davis on the conversation about the waivers, since she's on the communications committee with you, and also share this with her at that time, I appreciate it. All right, so on to our next agenda item, which is our safety and security system. Oh, thank you, yes, and so here is our sign-up sheet, if there are anybody is interested in speaking. And as a reminder, we don't have the speaker guidelines on the agenda today, but there's 2 minutes a person. Anybody's interested.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, so one of the things that, of course, has been brought to my attention is community concerns and safety and things here at Riverwood. And in conversation and in action, a lot of the things they've done at Ridgeview that their governance council has been involved in is putting together a safety committee that has done some really good work, and it consequently also had what I thought was a pretty good meeting that I had the opportunity to attend at Ridgeview. And got a lot of issues on the table, some opportunity to share some information. So what we want to do is find ways that we can make sure communication is open between the parents and the community. Also allow the safety committee that we're proposing to coordinate and communicate with the administration. There are some things in our safety plan that are not public record, but there's some of it that are, and a lot of it's been shared already with teachers and parents. And I also think that sometimes what happens in any community, our community is not unique to this, is that things will be said that are not true or exaggerated. And I see those emails and I'm like, wow. And some things we honestly can't talk about because it deals with student confidentiality. But I do think it would be a real strength for us as a governance council, as a school, as a community, to have a committee that would work on these issues and be able to communicate and share information. And certainly sit with us, and Mr. Amica is the assistant principal who handles our safety plans, and talk about what we need to do, what's out there, what concerns are, and what can we do in working with the district. We have had a safety walk with the district personnel. There's been some really good suggestions that have come out of that, including adding cameras, which is in the works, putting a gate of some type, a metal fence, and I'm going to try and explain this the best I can, over by the auxiliary chin so we can keep those doors unlocked during the day and still have it safe, and only people who have a key can have access to it. So those ideas are in the works, and we're working with Mr. Burke, who you met tonight, and with Mr. Muma and others to get those done as quickly as possible. All that kind of information is important to get out to the community, and a safety committee would be a great venue for that to happen. So what I'm thinking about, what I think Ridgeview did, correct me if I'm wrong, members of the council, is to have one or two members of this group who are willing to spearhead that effort, willing to take on, honestly, it's something I think should come from this group. I don't think it should come from the administration, but I would really like to see a faculty member or possibly a parent spearhead this effort, sit with myself and Mr. Amica, talk about what it looks like, and really get this thing rolling, because we're talking about the Ridgeview meeting now was, I believe, over a month ago, and we talked about doing it, and we really need to get it rolling. So with that being said, and kind of the mindset of where I'd like this to go, first and foremost, is there anybody on this group that would like to spearhead this effort and make it turn into a reality? Okay, sir.
I already got one.
Okay, I was like, maybe.
It's like an auction, be careful how you move.
Really? Just to fill the dead air.
Yeah.
I will make this observation. I think students need to be involved in this.
Of course.
Because, again, I'm not an expert on security, none of us are, but it appears to me that the student network of conversation and listening and reporting, that's the key to prevention. So I just want to make sure that kids know how important it is to report things, as insignificant as they may think it might be. If it's anything that you think is the longest of shots, that could endanger someone, you know, that needs to be brought forward. Because all the fences and locks and cameras and keys can only do so much. You really need the kids to be on alert.
Agreed. Well, and I will, not in an attempt to fill dead air.
Yeah.
You know, I will also say that really, and I've said this in writing and publicly, where we get most of our information is from exactly that source, when students, and you know, my role and new administrators and even the veteran administrators, you know, our goal is to build that trust and relationship with students so they do feel comfortable coming to us. And it happens a lot where they come and say, I heard this, I saw this. You know, we've had an issue today, pretty minor, but it was a student who came to us and said, this is something you should be aware of, and we were able to actually get somebody's phone back that was taken. So it does happen, and we want the kids to feel comfortable coming to us. So great point, great point. So again, we're still here. Anybody who wants to kind of spearhead this and take it on, and you know, we can do this via email if we don't have anybody jump up here now, and I understand we're all busy, but this is important. It matters to our community, as you can tell by the attendance here. It matters to me, and I know it matters to our staff. So.
And what do you think it entails?
Sure.
As far as time and committees and what exactly are
I
you
can talk a
looking
little
at?
bit about that too.
Go ahead, please do, Ms. Martin.
Okay, so we do have 2 parents on the Ridgeview board who spearhead this, and so really what they were charged with doing was gathering information and spearheading the communication between the school, the students, the parents, Fulton County Security, Fulton County Police, Sandy Springs Police Department, and it's a beautiful thing to see those lines of communication open and formal as well as informal discussion among all of them. So in our meeting yesterday, what we found is what the board felt was that it was a little, it needed to be reined in a little bit more instead of, you know, seeping out, just rein it in. So they're working on a mission statement, what charges does the council have for safety and security. But what we've also found is it's a lot of work for 2 people. So, you know, they are reaching out to others, and some of the teachers' concerns were, you know, we feel this might be overshadowing our, the academic side of being at school, and as a parent, we thought, well, the kids, you know, can't learn if they don't feel safe. So it's kind of a, you know, it's a 2-way street. And that's kind of where we are at Ridgeview at this point. We've only, we formed it a month ago, so we've only had really 1 meeting after all this gathering of information. So a lot has been accomplished in a month. But I'm sure the parents at Ridgeview would be more than willing to work with whomever wanted to get started here. And I mentioned lines of communication. So, I mean, I know I'm charged with some of that. So whomever it is, you know, I would be working with them to get these lines of communication open and out and so forth. But I think those of us who do have a position on the council now, Martha, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it would be fair to the rest of the members to have that, you know, one of those people take on a second charge when not everyone has gotten more involvement. And I do think that the students need to be involved in some respect.
Sure.
Maybe if they don't want to help head it up, but, you know, be involved with, you know, communication element.
And Martha, is it a requirement that a member of the council chair a subcommittee, or can there be a committee formed just?
It's not a requirement, but I think Dr. Shaw's preference would be that at least the chair be a council member.
Yeah, but I'm not so, I mean, if it's the difference between making it happen and not making it happen, I mean, certainly, you know, that's.
I was just thinking, I mean, if we had somebody who was a security expert,
Sure.
we have a lot of talented parents.
I do think we want to
identify somebody who had a real expertise.
Yeah. I think the line of reporting should be back to the council.
Yeah.
And I did talk to Tracy Unick, who's co-chairing the one at Ridgeview. Very interesting conversation. She actually did recommend keeping the committee itself small, because it's easier to get people together. There's only 2 of you. But that then there's opportunities to engage others, and I think Ridgeview's actually already done several things, as Dr. Shaw mentioned, that we could tack on with or learn from. Do you want to try to approach some people and you might want to leave it, or?
I don't mind. I'm at a disadvantage in doing that because you guys have the expertise of who's who in the community, and not to put another thing on your plate, but, you know, I mean,
Send you suggestions?
we can do that. Yeah, if you guys have suggestions, you can reach out to somebody who you think may be willing to do it. I mean, I'd like to get it rolling sooner rather than later, so if you want to send me some names, I don't mind reaching out to them, but, you know, having only been here a few months, I don't know the kind of contacts that you folks have, so.
Would you consider co-chairs?
What do you mean?
Two council members who share it?
Oh, yeah, sure,
Yes.
sure, absolutely. I think that's what they're doing already.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
And I will say, I think faculty
When
member
do
would
you
be
mention?
Absolutely.
an excellent role to have as a co-chair.
I'm glad you considered it.
I'll help you consider it.
Yes. All right, so where we stand right now then is, you're gonna send names, people I can reach out to and possibly get involved, and Dr. Square's thinking real hard about it and leaning towards doing it.
Well, let me just mention one of the things
Who's not here?
that one of the things that that Tracy Bruning at Ridgeview said she actually participated in was the Sandy Springs Police did a training for the teachers at Ridgeview. You heard about that?
Yes, I know faculty member did that recently.
Yeah, and,
All those person.
yeah. Was it well received?
Oh, he thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that might be something we can replicate here very easily at no cost. Anything else you need from us on that matter?
No, I think we're good. I would certainly appreciate the names and we can get this thing cooking.
The next item is the update on the bell schedule modifications.
Okay, so where are we on that? So backing up again, and we've been through this process, but enough to be transparent, I'll start from the beginning. One of the things I heard from day one was a concern about the 8-period schedule that we're currently on, and we've talked a lot about teacher turnover, morale, workload on the students, etc. So taking that anecdotal data, having conversations with many people, including community members, and then looking at the survey results that we sent out, all of this is online. We did meet with the leadership team. I want to be clear what that means. That's not just the administration, that also includes our department heads, graduation coach, head of our counseling, and made a decision to at least look into moving forward with a new schedule for next year. So each department head was asked to send a person to an in-house committee. Those people are listed on the website, and I really thank them for their service. And my only requirement for them is that they had the ability, as we do here, to come forward and think about the school as a whole. You know, everybody has their program, has their for lack of a better way of saying it, pet project. But we wanted people to come to this with an open mind and really think about what's best for the school as a whole. And I think I know these folks have committed to do that. The first meeting was not, hey, we're going to do block. That's not where we started. It was, who are we? The conversation we've been having here in Governance Council. What do we value? There are some things at Riverwood that are incredibly unique. Our fine arts programs, our International Baccalaureate program, the MYP program. Those things, if we value them, then our schedule has to protect them. And it's very simple, especially if you don't understand the scheduling process, to say, well, this looks great, and then realize an unintended consequence and we lose something that is important to us. So the first meeting, again, it's all online. I encourage you to go to the Riverwood website, and there's a blog set up specifically for step-by-step as we're having these conversations. And we have had our first meeting where we've talked about what we value, who we are. And there was some conversation about how we ended up with this. And that was there's a saying when you become a new principal, don't tear down a wall before you figure out why it was built. And so there was a lot for me to learn about how the 8-period day evolved, why we're doing it, what it was supposed to do, and some staff members felt very passionately that it hasn't achieved some of those goals. So that's where we are. The next step is to continue having these meetings, and just to back up a little bit, as I've explained before, we need to have a decision made no later in our timetable than January. The reason for that is because we have to start planning for next year, especially for our graduating class for next year. Those parents, those students are going to have a lot of questions. So we got to get this done quickly but correctly. And then the next step in the process is for what we've asked the members of the committee has been tasked with, is to talk to their department members and then to bring to the table some ideas to start talking about what does it look like. What will come out of the committee is 2 or 3 options. Listed with those will be the pros and the cons. For example, if we did a straight 7-period day, what would we gain, what would we lose? If we did a 4x4 block, an AB block, a hybrid, I mean, there's a zillion models out there. And then to certainly take that to the student leadership, we want them included in it, and then to take it to this body as well. And then our idea is to also have some parent information meetings, and then the Governance Council could certainly discuss it, have a vote on it, and then make a recommendation to me as well. And then that's where we go from there. So that's kind of the process. It is labor intensive, but there's a lot of good conversations that come out of it that have been very enlightening for me. So is there any questions from the Governance Council about the Bell schedule? Again, we're in the early phases of this, but anything I can answer.
When do you expect to have a recommendation? Did you say that?
We are shooting for, Mr. Blackwell, correct me if I'm wrong, the end of November, early December, is that what we were looking at? Okay.
So for our December meeting, we
Mhm.
can expect to have that as a discussion topic?
We certainly can.
And when do we have to, not that I don't think it's really our decision, but when does it need to be decided?
Like I said, I think we need to be able to tell our community after getting feedback and input, at least by January. Again, what we're looking at is, we've got to look at programs, we've got to look at what we offer, and it's such a big thing. Everything from work-based learning, which Ms. Jones and I are working on expanding for next year, that's going to be impacted by that. Courses that we offer. You know, for a senior who's on track to graduate, or junior, excuse me, who may want to take a minimum day next year, or a work program. So all these things have to be done by January so we can make these decisions and serve the kids in the community the best we can. So I would say January.
So, okay, so we just need to think about that from a communications standpoint from the Governance Council. Do you want, because I'm not sure, this might be something, Crystal, you could help us with. I don't really think we are required to vote on that.
No, you're
I
not.
think the schedule is the school administrator's responsibility. Do you want us to take action?
I think, and you know, thinking about how this is going to work, I think that this Governance Council is a great venue for that communication. And I would like a recommendation from the Governance Council. And, you know, I think that also gives us a great opportunity in a public forum to discuss, here's the different calendar, excuse me, here's the different schedules, here's what works, here's what doesn't. So, short answer, Ms. Greenway, is yes, I would love a recommendation from this council. If you wish to vote, I think that's really up to you, but it makes it a lot easier if I know what it is that this important group wants to do.
All right, just so we're clear, we're not the deciders.
Correct.
But if we can be endorsers,
Correct.
that might be helpful.
Absolutely.
So perhaps a public discussion will take place between our December meeting and our January meeting.
Yes, ma'am. And
Okay.
the thought that I kind of bounce around in conversation with Ms. Greenway is a discussion meeting and then maybe one small meeting just to make a recommendation. Maybe one short meeting, early January, maybe right after that winter break, to say, here's what we'd like to do. Just with maybe one agenda item. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that works, but that would seem a great way to go. I think to discuss it and make a recommendation in one meeting, I think that's a little unfair.
So, well, let's think about this between now and the October, this is October, the November meeting. You know, whether or not some kind of community-wide conversation might be important at the beginning of January. I'm just thinking we've got the construction with these charrettes, we've got the schedule, we've got the waiver chart, you know. But again, it's not for people to decide, but just to explain what's happening.
Sure.
Did I remember a public hearing on the strategic plan and the waivers?
On the waiver.
Not just an online thing, but a public.
comment. Yes.
And that's gonna happen sometime between November and December, right, in that 30-day period? So, does that meeting have to be exclusive to discuss waivers, or can the Bell schedule also be on that public?
Okay, so let's think about that next month. Let's talk about that,
Okay.
community input and how we want to stage certain things.
But I would also like to add that in our plan, we would do some community meetings outside of the Governance Council for people that can't make the meeting. The goal here, and I will say this publicly, whatever we decide, there's going to be people that are unhappy. But what our mission is to get out as much information as we can and to get as much input as we can and then make the decision that we feel best serves the needs of our kids and our community. So, you know, and I told the group the other day that, you know, when you're making a decision like this, not everybody's going to be happy, but, you know, we have some real issues here that are a creation of the schedule that we've got. Some good stuff.
Dr. Shaw, historically, how long have we been on periods? Weren't we on block like 5, 6?
Yeah.
2007, my brother was elected, and then it changed.
2007 was the last year of block.
It was an AB block type, I think. Yeah.
And was it still 7 periods? Still
So you
8.
get 8 periods on the
Okay.
block, which is why we have 8 periods now, because they went off the block, but they didn't want to give up 8
Gotcha,
periods.
gotcha.
So this was the sort of, the solution at the moment. Okay.
All right, next.
Yes, sir?
Okay, I do have SAT. I don't have ACT because, well, I messed up. But we can do ACT at the next meeting, and I apologize for that oversight. But I want to talk briefly about SAT and how we're doing. And all this information is public, and it's been on the AJC, it's on the Fulton County website, but I do think it's important to take a second and discuss it. For those of you who may not be aware, the Scholastic Aptitude Test is a different test from the ACT, and we can talk about that next time. So maybe it's serendipitous that it worked out that we're not doing it together. But there are three 800-point sections, okay? There is you can see it here, there is a reading section, a math, and a writing. Each one is worth 800, so top, perfect is 2,400. So what I've given you 2 charts here. The first is a comparison of where we did, it should say 2012 to 2013. The first is the N, that's the number of students we tested. You can see that went up 4 students. And then there's a critical reading mean, and we all know that mean is an average. So there's your score right there, 544, dropped to 524. By itself, the math average, 546, and this is just for Riverwood students, dropped to 523. The average writing, 541 to 510. Then there's different scores, and when you're looking at this in the AJC or you're looking at this online, you need to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So if you add the math and reading, obviously that gives you 1 score. Again, there was a substantial drop. But what most people are looking at is the total, where you take the math, writing, critical reading, basically add it together, and you can see that we had a drop in that as well. The second thing I gave you is the total math, writing, and critical reading score. And I compared them again to some of the people, and I told the staff on day 1 that we're always going to compare ourselves to the best schools in our area. Centennial, Milton, Northview, North Springs, of course they're right up the street. I looked at Walton right across the river, and then you also have the average for Fulton, Georgia, and the national average. And all of this was released in local media not too long ago. Let me also add here, because the next question comes up, is what do we do about this? Obviously there's some areas where it's dropped. What do we do to correct this? There's 2 things you can do. You can do quick fixes, you can do cram sessions, you can do programs, and I'm not opposed to doing that. What really moves your SAT score meaningfully is strong instruction in the classroom. Really making sure that our kids are exposed to an SAT vocabulary. We do have an SAT prep class here offered, which is pretty cool. We lost that in Cobb due to budget cuts, so I'm very excited that we have it, and we're going to have that filled for next semester, correct, Ms. Blackman? So that's a great opportunity for our students. But to parallel off of this, what we're starting next Tuesday is to work with our staff on really developing good, solid unit plans that are based on the standards. And included in our Common Core for English, for example, is SAT strategies. So the first step that we have to do as a faculty and administration is to make sure we have nailed down our in-class instruction, that it's based on meaningful standards, and that we're assessing kids based on what they need to know to be successful. Once you have that foundation, which we're working on and we're going to really jump into next Tuesday during our professional development day, then you start building strategies on top of that. And some of those can be targeted to SAT or ACT. So, in brief, that's where we are. And again, I apologize for not having the ACT numbers, but we will have those at the next meeting. So any questions that I can address about our SAT performance or strategies or anything like that? Okay. Sir.
I mean, I know there's so many factors that
There is.
go into it. You know, it's so hard to ever come up with an apples to apples. Obviously, class size has grown here tremendously from when, like, my oldest daughter was here and classes were 300 kids, you know. I'm also just curious, you know, the decision to limit out of district kids or out of attendance zone kids. I don't have any scientific, I just know a lot of those kids that were here, and they were some of the hardest working, brightest, wanted to be here kids. Do you see any, is there any connection between limiting our enrollment and SAT scores?
I'm going to honestly say I have no idea. I mean, I really don't.
These were last year's graduating seniors.
Right.
So we wouldn't see the effect of that for 3 more years. So this is, these are last year's seniors' scores. So that's always a little confusing because it doesn't come out.
Right.
You know,
Right. And is that an average of kids taking it 2-3 times, or
I
is
think they
it one
take their,
particular?
I always get this mixed up, but I think it's their highest score.
That's my understanding
It's
as well.
everybody who graduated last year's highest score, whenever that was. So if you had your highest score in 11th grade, it's that, but it's all the kids who graduated last year.
And let me add one more piece I forgot, and I need to make sure everybody knows about this. One of the components we look at that provides us some really good useful information is the PSAT, and that is going to happen the 16th. So our 9th, 10th, 11th graders, and again, something very cool about our district is they pay for those tests for the 9th and 11th graders. That gives not only us some good information for things like AP potential and maybe getting some kids who may fall off the radar and saying, hey, they can probably tackle an AP test, but also gives the parents and the kids some terrific information as they review and get ready for the SAT. So I'm really excited about seeing the PSAT and getting the results from that.
And did you have the data did this drop, was it predicted by PSAT scores?
I don't know. I don't know. Obie, do you know, Mr. Blackwell, do you know if there was any
PSAT
information
scores
about, I'm sorry?
Our PSAT scores were down from last year as well.
There you go, sir. All right, and that's what I have.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, so we have 10 minutes left for speakers. Is there anyone signed up to speak? Okay, we have 4 speakers, and I'll just remind you to have 2 minutes, and I will time you, so I'll just let you know if you go over. And the first speaker is Beth Cox.
Hi, I'll be very quick. I have, I guess since my daughter started here last year, been very concerned about the safety situation at the school. I was present here last Friday when a fight broke out. It was pretty horrifying. Kids do stupid things. Dr. Shaw and I have talked about it a lot. I've been very pleased with his response. I was mostly pleased that the children began to disperse when he came out there and yelled at them. That just says great things about what he's done here. One thing I would like to say to you, Claire, I, as part of the communications committee, we haven't talked in many months, but there are a lot of things that I've talked to Patrick Burke, I've talked to Dr. Shaw, I've talked to several people that are being done about security and safety in this building already. And I would recommend that these things be communicated to parents so that they would feel more secure. Since you're on the Ridgeview Safety and Security team, you know a lot of it is perception. And if you increase communication about what is being done, I mean, talking about that fence by the auxiliary gym, those are the things that will help parents and students to know that Dr. Shaw, the council here, and the county are actually trying to do some things. Came out in the AJC today about the door locks. These are the things that we need to communicate to our parents. So Claire, I'd love to help you on that.
Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Soraya Rushdie.
Hello, I have a question about the meaning of the international school for Riverwood. We talk a lot about the international aspect of Riverwood. I'm a big proponent of the IB program. I have 2 students going through the IB. And I was always surprised that the language part of the IB is always taught by teachers who are not native speakers. And I did ask the question about it, and the answer that was given to me was, we try to have IB native speakers teachers, but they don't understand the Georgia standards as much as the American teachers who have knowledge in the language. And as an international parent, I still don't understand how we can teach languages in a high level without having a native speaker teacher in the language, and how it can be a very important component in the IB. Atlanta National School and other international schools around the U.S. are doing that. They bring teachers from overseas. It seems that with the IB diploma, consortium, there is a support for that, and I would like to have a little more insight on it.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Carol Shelton.
I just wanted to just take a moment to thank everybody who's here for the time and effort that you guys spend on behalf of the school, the students, the staff, the administration, and just acknowledge that publicly, that I do appreciate what you guys are doing and the issues that you're struggling with and tackling, which are quite complex. And just to know that there's a real positive energy in the building. That's been my perspective, since we got started, and I think a lot of that has to do with Dr. Shaw coming in and the new teachers on campus, but also I think it has to do with the fact that there's a lot of good work being done. And just know that there's a positive energy also outside the building among the general parent population that it just acknowledges the work that you guys are doing. So thank you.
And our last speaker is Ann Jarvis.
I have two things. Wanted to see, Dr. Shaw, if I could encourage you. I think last time we did look at schedule changes for Riverwood, that they did send something back out to all the parents and said, here are the two options we're looking at, or three options, and allowed them to vote, saying to make sure, because the governance may not be representing the entire diversity between Magnet, IB, et cetera, of all the families within the Riverwood community. So I would encourage you to possibly do that. Pam, you brought up the point about the clubs and parents, and I want to let you know that in theory that sounds like a great idea, but I think the seniors can tell you right now, I think the administration is dealing with a situation right now where we have a team that does not have Fulton County teacher and doesn't have Fulton County coach associated with it, and unfortunately you got a situation where there was a team meeting and there wasn't the entire team included, so you've got situations where funds were being used for only a certain number of children, et cetera. It's caused a huge issue, and it's very sad that has to happen, but then it opens up Fulton County for liabilities because the parent and the coach is unaware of what Fulton County's true policies are. And I hate to add any more work to the teacher, but if something could come up where parents could be involved but not have control over money, not have control over how a club is run, to make sure every single person is included. There cannot be discrimination. We can't open up Fulton County for liability if a parent wasn't including everybody. And that just, I think, is a really key part, because we have such a diverse, amazing school. Everybody should be able to participate whatever they want to. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we are at 5:55, just under the wire. So thank you, audience, for being here, and thank council members for attending.